Hello Julie class, this is Mrs. Gardner again, and today we're going to make a homemade bezel that's preparing for resin on another video. And so on the homemade bezel, let's see, a bezel, let me find one that's already ready made. Here's a store-bought one. It has a back to it, kind of like a pan with walls coming up to hold the liquid resin. That's a ready-made one. We're going to make our own, and you can either find objects, like here are some like here's a washers that are for other purposes, but it makes a very interesting kind of frame. They're going to hold in some resin, of course empty back. We're going to use packing tape to make the backs of our bezels. And then these are kind of like a washer. It has another name for it, but only bad thing about this, it has very little surface area that actually touches when you set it down, so that gets a little trickier. Sometimes the resin likes to kind of leak underneath a little bit. This one kind of did a little bit like that, but I trimmed it. So this is even better though. See how thick the wall is for this potential bezel, and that's really beautiful finished wood. I bought those, and I'm just experimenting what I'm going to put into it later. So I'm going to get those out of the way for now. And then I have bezels that are more organic, kind of just hand-shaped. This is like a favorite because it's so large. And I made some polymer clay hearts and baked them in, cured them in the oven and had those kind of ready ahead of time. A little bit of air bubbles in the resin, but I kind of actually like that. Usually that's not something you want, but I kind of like bubbles sometimes. But you can see the walls that I made with this flat wire. Okay, and you can get different colors and sizes and things, but it's a nice bendable jewelry wire. It's really aluminum that has color on the outside. And then here are some smaller ones. I like to put clear things like pieces of chunks of glass in them, because you can see through them, all the way through. That's a nice thing about having an open back bezel. And here's one that I just put together not long ago. I'm going to simulate a homemade one like this. And here are some of the tools. These are flush cutters, really nice because it gives you a nice straight cut that's very clean, kind of a side cutter. And these are round nose pliers. It'll be nice because I can kind of bend it to get that nice little hole that's really round without marking it up too much. Okay, and a little bit of glue, because I found out that if you don't kind of get a little tiny bit of something to block, the resin will just find any little escape in between the gaps, even if you think you have it together. That's difficult to do, so a little bit of glue. I'm experimenting, and this one, you can't see it, but there's a little bit of Elmer's glue in there just to kind of fill that gap. And then this is an interesting one where I hammered the wire. That was a fun one to do. Okay, so I'm going to move these out of the way, and I'm going to take some of the wire. I don't have a really predetermined amount, but I do have this PVC pipe. I thought it'd be cool to make a really large one. So I would just kind of, also, that's how I made the last one. I kind of bent it around to give a nice curve. That would have been kind of difficult for me. And I have a little bit of extra, perhaps an inch. Now I'm going to get my flush cutters and try to get a very straight cut. Get that out of the way. Get this out of the way. If it wasn't, I could always recut. So I already have a fairly nice shape. Let's get this one back here again. Going a little bit bigger this time. I'm trying not to get too much of a kink or anything. And I am going to use my round nose pliers. Sometimes I bend on one side and then I go to the other side and kind of finish the bend. I'm trying to keep one side very flat, so I had to just kind of look at it and see. I want it to sit flat. Oh, and a little piece of sandpaper here. Sometimes when you get that fresh cut, it's a little bit rough. I don't want to scar it up, but I want to just kind of get it so it meets nice. Now see that gap? That's a toughie sometimes. You have to like kind of overcompensate or kind of coax it in as close as you can get it so that the glue will not have too big of a gap to try to fill. Oops, I'm not finished yet. I'm going to close this up because once it is finished, I don't want to come back and try to bend that later. Okay, so now I'm going to try to finish getting that gap together. Kind of closed up a little bit. Not too bad. And of course, when you get back to class, you all can take your time a little bit more. I'm kind of rushing here. Okay, when I have it as close as I think I can get it, I'm going to get a little bit of glue in there. Helps to open it. Have more of a gap than I'd like to get. I'd like to have. Oh, okay, that's better. Get in there with this. I would never pour resin next to wet glue. Moisture and resin do not go well together, but of course it doesn't take long for this to dry. It'll shrink up a little bit anyway. Sometimes I swipe a little bit away. Let's leave it there. Okay, so that was actually pretty quick. Now, I'll bring this back in here. This is an easy one to demonstrate how to make the back for your bezel. It's really just packing tape. That's really all it is. I get a piece that's substantially larger than my actual bezel. And it's a little bit awkward. You have to like turn it upside down, sticky side up, and it likes to stick to my fingers there. And I'm gonna I'll try Scotch tape this time, or cellophane tape. Now I'm just gonna anchor it. Now, if I was really gonna get this ready for resin, which I am, I'm gonna get my non-stick surface out. And this is just wax paper. You could use parchment paper. You could use non-stick side of foil, whatever you think of, silicone mat, whatever you're kind of comfortable with. Give enough room around it in case anything spills. So I'm just kind of anchoring it sticky side up, trying to keep it flat. You probably can't see it that well. I'll move around, maybe it'll catch the light a little bit. Okay, so sticky side up for the packing tape. And then I just set this on here. I'm really trying to get it to stay. I mean, really pushing on it. Okay, this is a nice size. It probably won't have any leaks. Now, a lot of times I like to get the tape and put it on. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll just get my old one that has a dry glue. And I can try to see which side I think will lay flatter. So if one side's flatter than the other, then go for that one. Okay, look about the same. I'm just gonna put the sticky side down. So this is another way to kind of go about it. Let me move this over where you can see it a little better. And I'll anchor that down on the corners, because remember, this packing tape's sticky side up. Okay, I'll just do two sides this time. And I'm really going to push on it, because you really don't want gaps. I've even used modeling clay before, and just, saw a gap kind of after the fact, before I did the resin, and put a little modeling clay to form kind of a dam in some obvious gaps that I didn't want to have a problem with it running out the side or anything. So that's, in a lot of ways, you can kind of fool with that. I mean, I could, if I see a gap, I could put like a little touch of glue, and that glue can be picked off later. It's not a big deal. Okay, so that's basically how you do it. You shape a wall with a wire, or ready-made type shapes like that. And just make sure the ends meet up the best you can. So just any kind of open-walled shape, like oh yeah, these are called O-rings. I was trying to think of the name, O-rings and washers and things, as a bezel. And clear packing tape bigger, anchor it down to a level surface that's nonstick. And basically it's ready for figuring out what I'm going to put inside. Look on this one. This is just some really crazy yarn that's meant to be kind of thready looking, real fibrous. I'm going to kind of just gently put that in there, get that shoved in, so when I pour resin, I'll make sure all that gets kind of worked in there. And you just pretty much set it up the way you want it. Sometimes you can drop embedments in after you pour the resin, and that would be fine too. Oh yeah, important thing. So once you do pour resin in, you need to make sure you let these sit overnight to at least get a soft cure of the resin. I'm using epoxy resin. Before you try to peel away the packing tape, because it has to be, you don't want it to leave like fingerprint marks or be soft before you trim it or before you peel it. So give it at least a soft cure, at least a day. But if you want it to be really nice and clean, you can wait a couple days for a hard cure before you peel it and trim it. That's really the smart way to go about it. And you see all these little things I have? I'm going to have little gold leaf and some nice little embedments. I have powder, and I have sand and shells. This is a little big, but I'm saving it. I'm going to use these little ones right here. Okay, so I'll let you go.